Well, welcome back. I hope you were well. Today I want to pick up from the conversation that I started in yesterday's session, which I titled Why Retention is Difficult for Modern Women. I would like to provide, an antidote to yesterday's conversation, but with a twist. Today's topic, therefore, is why retention and making the decision is hard for modern men. Now, I think this will be of benefit to both sexes, but I do believe that women might find this to be more valuable in understanding how men think. Now, without further ado, let me start as follows. There are terms and terminologies that you have heard me use in explaining relational dynamics. One of those terms is the marketplace. So, let's begin with the marketplace. As a woman, and most women struggle to understand why, having invested and after investing so much time into a man, into a man's life, into a man's vision, why for some reason we find it very hard to make that decision. That decision that is all about commitment, proclaiming your love, or proclaiming our love to you. And for those few who still believe in the institution of marriage, walking down the aisle and beginning a family with the intention of having children raised according to the sequence of the traditional steps: marriage, then the kids. There are several reasons. The marketplace is perhaps the first place to start. I'm going to say a few things, and I might go in different directions, but please take as you can what is relevant to you. My first statement, and let this statement hang at the back of your mind as I converse and speak to you today. First statement: it's better to find and be with and settle with the wrong man, but meet him in the right environment or marketplace, than to be with the right man and meet him and be with him in the wrong environment or marketplace. And let me expand on that briefly. Think about animals. Human beings are designed and were made, and how we function is very similar to animals. The environment is just as important as the species. In actual fact, in terms of the sequence of how things work, the environment precedes and should come first before the species. Fish and water. One was created first. Fish, water, birds, air. The same applies to human beings. You take a fish out of water, in a short few minutes, the fish will die. You keep him out of water for a few seconds and place it back in water, and it regains its functionality. In water, the fish is doing what it is created to do, but it's in the environment that allows its natural essence and uniqueness to flourish. Outside water, most people think of fish as having no intelligence, no meaning, having nothing to offer other than being food. You take a bird and you place a bird inside a closed aquarium or inside water, the bird dies very quickly. It's in the wrong environment. You set the bird free. You start to see the bird's essence, its uniqueness, its purpose, its function manifest, because it is doing what from its internal nature comes naturally. Same bird, you place it in a cage and you see a different and a restricted part of what the bird's essence is all about. Human beings are the same. We have a purpose. In the right environment, our purpose will flourish. In the wrong environment, we feel frustrated. But sometimes we are always in what I call the pathway towards the right environment. We have to go through sometimes, for some people, a preparation period. Now, dating for men follows the same process. I use marketplaces for a specific reason. If I walk into, for example, Nando's, I'm aware of what they serve. I don't walk into Nando's and ask for a sirloin steak prepared medium rare, served with whatever my choices and preferences are. I do not. It's the wrong place, the wrong marketplace. In the same way, if I were to walk into McDonald's, I do not walk into McDonald's and ask for the variations of cookies or cupcakes. Part of the reason being it's a different marketplace, it's a different environment. Now, as men, generally speaking, we journey through life in pursuit of what we want and in pursuit of how we will achieve our end goal. Some of us know what the purpose of life should be, our lives. Some of us are creating a purposeful driven life. That journey means we have to go through what I call the wilderness. And in doing so, as we journey, we go into marketplaces. Sometimes it's the marketplace that has to do with just friends. I'm looking for male friends, there's a marketplace for that. Sometimes we're looking for companionship, there is a marketplace for that. Sometimes we're looking just for sex, there is a marketplace for that. Now, I started and I made a statement, which is, and I should reiterate that statement, I think for repetition reasons. It's better to meet and be with the wrong person, but meeting in the right place, than to be with the right person, but he be in the wrong place. And let me expand on that slightly. Let's assume you have two people, and let me use you if you are a man or a woman. In this case, let's assume you are a lady. I'll call you Mary. Mary has met Joseph. Mary is ready for a committed, stable, long-term relationship. She has her aspirations and her intentions of marriage. Mary is 25. Joseph is 27. Mary is in love with Joseph. She's known him for 4 years. She would happily be with him for the rest of her life. Joseph is not ready to settle now. Mary has succeeded in being attracted or attracting Joseph, but she's failed in retaining Joseph and getting him to make and take the next steps. Now, the confusion is that if you were to go back to my initial statement, we would say that Mary is in love with Joseph, and let's just also agree that Joseph is in love with Mary. She has met the right person. The first question should always be, where did you meet him? And by meet, I'm referring to two things. One is the physical place, but also the emotional place or the emotional state. If you meet a man in the dating marketplace, one of the questions that a woman should put forward should be, do you, Mr. Man, Mr. Joe, Joseph, do you intend to leave the dating marketplace? I should clarify that dating is synonymous with sex for most men. Most men are in the dating marketplace primarily because we crave, we desire, we want sex. We camouflage the whole thing about dating by making it seem to be something more serious than it should be. And we do so because, if we are honest, we do not gain what we want. Women cannot handle the truth. So we court you, we buy you flowers, we learn things that are near and dear to your hearts, all just so that we can be accepted by you in whatever way that comes across, and with the intention that eventually we get to ejaculate. It's really that simple. If Joseph is in the dating marketplace and he intends to be there for the next 5-6 years, meaning he has no intentions of a serious relationship and has no intentions of getting married and has no intentions of doing it in the nearest future, it means Mary has found the right person but has met him in the wrong place. Now, she might strawman him into marriage, or she might strawman him into a relationship by, for whatever reason, conceiving, despite being on the pill for a long time. But she might think, well, I'm going to nudge him into responsibility. The problem is he refuses to take accountability and become responsible. I can make you one promise. All things remaining equal, you will hurt yourself in the long run, because what you've done is you've taken a person who is not equipped for the environment for which you seek to remain in, and you've placed them there. And at some point, he will come to the realization that he is in a prison. Now, for some men, they will remain there until they die. The reason being that you cannot escape from a prison except you acknowledge that you are in one. Now, for many people who are listening, you might be wondering or thinking, why am I using the reference of a prison to compare it to a relationship? Well, every relationship is like it's like a three-sided coin, not a two-sided coin. Every coin has three sides: heads, tail, and the edge. A relationship that is not, or that contains two people, one of which has a different vision, but is forced to remain there, that is no different from being in a prison. You're there against your will. If the doors were open, most people will willingly walk out. So, now, but let me go back to Mary. Mary is with the right person, but she's met him in the wrong place. She's met him in the physical marketplace for dating, meaning perhaps his short-term or medium-term intentions is purely to keep things very casual. She would do better for herself, which is a mistake most women make, in letting him go and finding someone who she loves less, but who is in the right place. Joseph is not in the right place physically, but he's also not in the right place emotionally and mentally. Now let's say Mary was to meet Peter, and Peter is 35 or 36, not as attractive as Joseph. Therefore, Mary is not as attracted to him as she was Joseph. Peter, on the other hand, is in the relationship marketplace, or his intention is to remain in the relationship marketplace, but for some reason, in his journey towards where he wants to be, he happens to come across or walk past Mary. He introduces himself and they start talking. And he says to her, well, I'm heading north. I think that's where I saw the star. And a baby will be born to us. Maybe babies. Join me in this journey. I make you a few promises. I will always be there for you. I will always love you. I will provide, protect, and be the priest in the relationship. If you would, join me in the journey. Mary, on the other hand, doesn't have the same feelings for him. Now, let's look at the comparison between her relationship with Joseph and the would-be relationship with Peter. Number one, Peter may be the wrong person. And by wrong person, I'm speaking from Mary's perspective. Mary's still young, so she believes that there is something called the one. Joseph is the one. Peter may be the wrong person, but he is in the right place. He is in the right marketplace physically, but he is also in the right place emotionally and mentally. Therefore, assuming the love that she has for Peter is half the love that she actually had for Joseph, despite what I might call the deficit in love on her part, she's destined to have a much more fruitful relationship, all things remaining equal, if she were to choose Peter than Joseph. And the reason is simple. When men are ready, we are ready. Retention becomes a natural process, and taking the steps to show that we are ready comes naturally. If we are not ready, and assuming you've met us in the wrong place, you can try as much as possible. The conversion process may take longer. We may be forced into the conversion process. We might actually even have the title of a husband, partner, boyfriend. But at some point, like every prison, we will escape. Now, for most people, let me speak to myself. In my 20s, and I have said this to both loved ones and friends and publicly, I have been blessed in the fact that I've always had great people around me. If I were to go back and I looked at all of the women who I've had the honor of being involved with at whatever level or capacity, but in specific terms, in an intimate way, the one thing I can say for, and which is what I call the regression line, the through line that connects all those women, the one thing that is certain is that they were all capable of being good wives. They were good girls, came with good intentions and good faith. But all of those relationships never went beyond a certain period of time. For most of them, it was almost like a clock. You could set the clock, and at that certain time, I would leave. I would leave not because there was something wrong with them. I would leave because they met me in the wrong marketplace. I was in the dating marketplace, and there was no such thing as maturing too fast or growing up. You couldn't belittle me and get me to change my position. That was where I was mentally and emotionally and physically. Let me also say the following. I also said, and I've said this from my early 20s, that had I married any one of those women, I was guaranteed, I knew for a fact that I would be divorced in about 2.5 years. Now, some women might say that it's because I wasn't mature. Plausibly, I'll grant you that. Some other women might say that perhaps I loved the game or the marketplace too much, maybe. Some might even say that maybe it was for a different reason. I'm going to share two things that women should always, I guess, use in every conversation whenever a man says, I am not ready. So for example, any man who said to you, I am not ready, he's saying, I am not ready to get married. That is the statement. I would like you to add 2 words or a few extra words to that statement. I am not ready, or he is not ready to get married to me. That's the first. There's always to me. Number 2, he is not ready to get married right now. Most men, given the time and given the opportunity to leave one marketplace and move to the other, will make the right decision. And this is perhaps something that a lot of women find difficult to accept. You might date someone for 5 years. You may have been engaged. The engagement was called off because perhaps he wasn't ready or mature. And 3-4 months down the line, you hear that he's married. And you're thinking, something doesn't seem right. How could I have dated him for 5 years and been with him for that long, and he's met someone, and in a few months, they are married? And for some reason, despite sometimes the negative intentions and wishes, their relationship is thriving. The reason is simple. Most women think, and most men also think, that we can calculate with precision the number of years or the time it would take for us to transition from one place to another. In other words, for us to go from, to use a reference that some people might understand, that it would take a specific amount of time for us to go from Egypt through the Red Sea into the wilderness, through the River Jordan, and into Canaan. Canaan being the promised land. That's where you should meet him, where he is ready. There's abundance, he's in the right place. However, he has to go through 2 bodies of water, to use that reference. But most importantly, he has to endure the period between both bodies of water, the wilderness. So, if you've met him in Egypt, meaning the dating marketplace, inasmuch, and this is perhaps a difficult thing for women to understand, inasmuch as the adventure together is more likely to bond both of you together over the long term. This is the understanding we all have, men and women. I want to meet him when he is nothing, and we build together. We have experiences together. There is a much higher chance that he will bury you in the desert, or that you will drown in one of the 2 bodies of water. Now I'm speaking metaphorically, of course. The point being, in order for you to go through the first body of water, and through the desert, and through the second body of water, the person leading you has to be of the right caliber. Now, we make mistakes when we ask boys to be men too soon, or when we make boys into kings, and we give them too much responsibility. See, freedom comes with responsibility. Most men are not ready for the responsibility. We want to be free, but freedom comes with chaos. Order is the antidote to chaos, and order is when you are in a controlled state. Most men are not ready for that and should not be pushed into that position too early. Let me give you a good example. One of my favorite movies, I should also say, One of my favorite actors is Daniel Day-Lewis, a British actor. In my opinion, the greatest to have ever done it. An exceptional actor. The Last of the Mohicans is a movie made many years ago. Without going into the detail, those of you who have not seen that movie should see that movie. There is a scene in the movie. We have three men. Great way to explain today's session. And maybe perhaps I should use the movie as a great explanation about the journey through manhood. An older man has two sons, one biological and the other, you could say, adopted. The older son and the younger son. For some reason, cut the long story short, there is a scene where, and let me put some context, the two sons meet two women and they're drawn to the women. I wouldn't use the word love, but there is some infatuation and lust and connection with the women. The older son is wise, smart, intelligent, calculating, obviously mature. The younger son lacks maturity and is not as calculating as his brother or his father. The scene in question is as follows. The younger girl who is drawn to the younger man is taken away. The three men have to go and taken away with a number of other men. She's been given to another man, and as they take her up this mountaintop, beautiful background, beautiful soundtrack. I think, if I recall, the soundtrack was done by I could be wrong, but I think it could have been done by Enya. Wherever you go, I will find you. And here we have these three men going up the hill to rescue the two women that have been taken away. And this is perhaps a classical way of understanding why men don't pull the trigger. Sometimes why we pull the trigger too early, to our detriment, and why we hesitate, because we are aware of what could be our destiny. Three men, exceptionally skilled at the art of fighting, going up a hill to rescue two women, understanding carefully that they would have to get through all of the obstacles which are the other opponents in order to rescue the woman or the two women. The young one is too in love. His emotions are all over the place, and he does what most men do. He leaves the group. Now let me say this for young men, the younger you are, the more you should stay with the group. You are stronger together as a group than you are alone. You are not a lion yet, especially within a certain age range. Personally speaking, I think men who are below 30, I would compare them to the young man in question. But he breaks out of the group. Why? Because he has this ability, the ability which is youth. You might even say the testosterone. He outruns his father and his elder brother. And he gets, he understands the mountains and gets through. But he makes a mistake of getting to the point where he is at the top. He maneuvers, and here he is eventually in front of who we consider in the movie to be the villain. Someone who is a ferocious competitor, very skilled in fighting. His emotions, the young man's emotions, leads him down the path to his death. Sad scene. I would recommend you go watch the scene. And what is shameful and sad is, as a young man, you have to understand your strengths and you have to understand your capabilities, and you should never be ashamed of not being good enough in a particular place or time. We journey, we all begin somewhere. For example, when I started martial arts, when I got to my first black belt, first dan, the mistake most people make, you're led to believe that the fact that you have this belt means you are some great fighter. I tell a lot of people, and especially people I train with, and the younger ones who have the passion to get black belts, I always said, that's when you start training. I didn't actually begin, in my opinion, speaking for myself, I would say that I became exceptionally good at the point where I became and I achieved the third level or third degree in black belt, what we call third dan. Why? Because you have this long number of years of doing the same thing over and over again. From white belt, you're accelerated and you go through white and yellow and go all the way down to all the other belts, purple, brown, and all of your aspirations is only about getting that black belt. You jump steps, sometimes you double grade, sometimes most senseis will overlook some of the things you do not know. When you get the black belt, and I did this specifically once, I remember once, and I apologize that I deviated from today's session. There was once I had a young boy who had he used to train, he was very dedicated. And he graded for his black belt and he passed, which I was pleased with. But I remember this particular scene at the end of the training session. He was leaving the studio, what we call the dojo, with his black belt, wearing his gi and his belt in full display, wearing a jacket but his belt in full display. And as he just about to leave the main hall into the streets, I called him back. And I said to him, I said, I'd like you to zip up your jacket and conceal your belt. And he didn't understand, but he listened. I let her explain to him, the reason I said so was as follows. There is an overinflated sense of self-worth, ego, and ability when you wear a black belt or when you have a black belt. On the average, most people who are black belts are not very good. In my opinion, they are average at best. I said, if you walk through those doors, it's 9, 9:15. What if you encounter people on the streets, people who are street boys? And I know how men think. They see you with that belt and they think, well, I'd like to test him. And they pick a fight. I said, you're not ready for the streets. Now, the following week when he came back to me and I expanded on what I was saying. And I said to him, well, okay, let me watch you. I'd like you to do the following kicks. And I kid you not, I would have failed him in his grading. I would have failed him in 3 belts before the black belt grading. That's how poor his performance was. He couldn't kick, couldn't do certain things, even he couldn't punch properly. And this is what happens when you're in a group. The sensei doesn't pay attention to everyone. You're seen as a group. Even when you grade, you're part of a group. What they're looking for is that you have the potential, but sometimes you may not have the ability. Now, we all go through the same process. I did. I went through the same process myself. There were times I had certain belts that I was not deserving of. I'm not criticizing the man in question. I'm simply saying that we often have an overinflated sense of who we are as men. Now, let's go back to the movie. This young man, outruns his older brother and his father, who are much better than he is in the art of battle, gets to the top, gets into a fight with the most skilled opponents and gets killed. Now, what is fascinating is His father arrives on the same hill, gets into battle with the same villain, and annihilates the villain so easily. Two things from the whole scene. Number one, as young men, you have to control your emotions. And number two, stay with the group until you are ready. Now, what does this have to do with dating? Well, remember what I said. It's better to meet the wrong person, but in the right place, than to be with the right person, but he be in the wrong place. Retention for men comes naturally when we are in the right place, in the right environment, despite not being the right person. I've said to some of my female friends, when a man is ready, it doesn't matter the woman who stands in front of him. The success of the relationship and the responsibility for failure comes down to the man. So perhaps in bringing today's session to a close, let me share the following statement. A woman, your responsibility is to attract a man. You are judged by the quality of man that you can attract. But attraction is easy because most men in the dating marketplace will accept anything. The question is, did you attract him in the dating marketplace or in the relationship, marriage marketplace? Which is what we judge by is retention. It's not what you attract, it's what you retain. So in the main marketplace of relationships, women are judged by the quality and the caliber of man that she's able to retain. Now, it becomes hard because she has no control directly with regards to being retained. Now, in yesterday's session, I gave some examples of the good woman and the qualities she has, but also I give an expanded version when I talk about servanthood and serenity as opposed to sex. You can give everything that should be given. You can be perfect. You can be a great girl. You can be beautiful. You can be loyal. You can be everything, but still not good enough. And perhaps this is a word of encouragement for young women to understand that sometimes it's not just you. Go back to the analogy of a bird and a fish. The fish, doesn't matter how beautiful the fish is, well intentioned, if it's in the wrong environment, if it's on land as opposed to in the seas, it will die. The man you meet, the man in your life, it's more important for him to be in the right place. And in connecting back to the story, disavow yourself of the idea that building with a man would mean and guarantee that you and him will live happily ever after. Not so. Sometimes the journey, going through the bodies of waters, will break you, will break the relationship, and eventually when he is ready, he will choose someone else. Now, I said something which had to do with the following. Time is not in the success equation when it comes to men. The whole idea, I use time as a marker to give men an idea about when they should begin to consider. You've heard me say before, modern men particularly, should not consider marriage before, in my opinion, before age 35. From 30, the consideration can begin, but you have 5 years. That 5 years is a time period to allow the man to transition physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, even financially. To get through that desert alone, perhaps one of the most important things I should say. The journey into manhood, irrespective of age, for a man has to be done alone. The biggest mistake most women make, because most women have been told, is that you should be there with him when he journeys through life, because you will have a stronger bond. I can tell you from experience, that is false. I have had great women in my life. I've had the honor of having great women. And I've perhaps several times I was journeying through my wilderness. And when I came into Canaan, having gone through from Egypt, through the Red Sea, into the wilderness, through the River Jordan, when I came to Canaan, unfortunately, sadly, I buried all of them in the desert. Not, and I'm speaking metaphorically again, I didn't bury them because I thought it was necessary. I buried them because my transformation, my journey to manhood was necessary, and I placed myself as the first priority. I wasn't ready, and it didn't matter how beautiful she was, and it didn't matter how kind she was, and it didn't matter how well skilled and how much of a servant she was to me and my vision. I was in the wrong place. So modern men struggle with retention and struggle to make the next leap and take that step because they are in the wrong place. You have met them in the wrong marketplace. You've met them physically, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually in the wrong place. And it's not about you. It's just time and chance. You will have more success if, as a woman, you're able to read the cues and understand, read the tea leaves and recognize where he is and where you meet him. And disinvest very early if you feel and if you can see. My recommendation is let sight guide you better than feeling. Don't judge based on potential. Big mistake. There are many women who judge me based on potential, who I buried in the desert. Again, speaking metaphorically. The relationship died. The relationship died very early. Why? They were judging me based on potential. I had potential. As a woman, you should always judge based on two things. Number one, and most importantly, results and outcomes. Number two, and this is an exception to number one, immediate or potential short-term outcomes. In other words, at 23, if you're just about to graduate, you have potential. There is no guarantee that you will be successful. No guarantee. You might become a bum in 4 or 5 years. On the other hand, you've graduated, you've just been employed, your first job, you're making £25,000 a month. There is something tangible that I can assign a risk measure to understand the possibility of your long-term earning potential. You started to earn. I can work with that. You cannot work with the possibility of what someone might earn. So you either judge men based on outcomes and results and where you find them, or you judge based on less than a 2-year period of conversion of a potential to results. Too often you have women who will invest 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years in a man, in my opinion, wrongly. And at the end, unfortunately, learn the hard way that they were buried in the desert. Now, I should say this. I'm not suggesting that you date someone for 2 years. No. You should be dating for 6 months or less. As a matter of fact, when you meet the right person, you would know. If he is in the right place, you would know, because you wouldn't have to lead with questions. You would be led. You would feel the aura, and you would feel that you're moving in a direction. A lot of women make the mistake of saying, what do you think of our relationship? Where do you see us? In 2 years' time, What aspirations do you have for both of us? Where is this relationship going? What would you call what we have? These are all wrong questions. If you are asking these questions, then you are not the one. It's very simple. The reason is simple. When a man is in the right place, having journeyed through the various stages, there is an awakening process that takes place. He goes from being Saul to being Paul. The things he once or used to love, he actually begins to hate, and the things he used to hate, he starts to love. There is almost a shedding of the old self and being born into someone new. That transformation process, when you meet the right person in the right place, there will be no need to ask those questions, because you would be led in such a way that you understand that he is awakened, and therefore you would find that the time period between when you start dating and when he's ready to actually get married could be months, it could be 6 months, it could be 4 months, it could be 3 months. He doesn't have to be with you for years and years and years. So let me draw today's session to a close as follows. For women, pay attention, pay close attention to things other than your feelings. Now let me share something with you. In conclusion though, a lot of women think that the love that is expressed or felt in a relationship is what will guarantee the success of the relationship. Wrong. A man who has come to his awakened state and is ready understands 3 things. That he needs wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. He doesn't need love. Love does not get the job done. It never has, it never will. He needs wisdom. By wisdom, a house is built. By understanding, it is established. And with knowledge, the rooms are filled with beautiful treasures and gifts and ornaments. Wisdom, understanding, knowledge. Knowledge is information. You have to have the right information of knowing how to make a relationship work, if that's what you want. But you can have the right information and not understand the information, because you need comprehension. Now you can have understanding, having comprehended the information, having more knowledge, and also not know how to apply the information. Men who have awakened have the 3. They understand their purpose, and they are ready, therefore, to provide, to protect, and to be the priest in the family, to teach. So, as a woman, whilst it comes naturally to you to judge based on feelings, well, I don't love him as much. No. The question should not be how much you love him, despite it being important. The question is, does he have the knowledge, the understanding, and the wisdom to lead me, or to lead us? Love is an emotion, it's a feeling. We go through what we call the in-love phase, and then we go through into a crash where the love disappears. But if he is in the right frame and has wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, whether there is love or not, and whether the love is cyclical or not, one thing is guaranteed: you will have the right person leading you, and therefore you can be the right helpmeet to the person. Now, in today's session, I've spoken about relationships. Now, for some women, they do not want relationships in the traditional sense, marriage, cohabitation. They just want to be happy. Well, if you are part of that group, that is your choice. I don't see anything wrong with that choice. But what I shared today is perhaps not for you. Despite the truism, which is you can still use some of this information in the dating marketplace. So if you met a man who had all of this information and you met him in the wrong marketplace, well, there's a possibility that he might do what I see most women do. he might try to draw you and drag you from the one marketplace into the other. Or what I see most of the time is women meet great men and try to drag them from one marketplace to the relationship marketplace. Now, think about what happens psychologically when we are forced into places that we have not walked into by our own accord. We seek a means of escape. The man in your life, assuming he's not what I've described, might remain in the same jail, prison, because he doesn't know he is in one. You can't help someone who doesn't acknowledge that they are in a prison. Now, let me close today's session by saying the following. Retention is easy to understand. There's a transition that takes place whether you are a man or a woman. Whichever side of the table you are on, understand how you can make the process easier for both parties, but most importantly, always communicate. Now, I would say something in closing that I should have said at the start. If I look at my 20s and my 30s and my 40s, just look through the journey of my life, the one thing I would do differently was I would have been a better communicator. I would say to myself, I've always I've always had the peace of mind in recognizing that in every relationship, short or long, I've always been true and I've always stated my intentions. The one thing I would hold myself to accountable or account of not doing properly is ending it early before the feelings develop. So, for example, a lot of men do this. You know where you are, you know what you want, but you don't communicate that very early. And even if you do communicate it early, the woman believes that she can change you. And rather than simply say, no, I'm going to cut this cord and free you, you simply say, listen, don't try to change me. If you want to be with me, fine, but you're not going to change me. And then it takes a number of years, a number of months, a number of days before she realizes he's not going to change. So I'm going to free myself. Now, I hope that's been useful.